Growing up, we weren't rich, but we were happy. I'm Tiffany, the oldest of 3 sisters in our family. My sister Marcy came after me, and then there was Lana, the baby of the family. Dad worked as a van driver, and Mom stayed home to take care of us. Times were tight, but somehow we managed. Then came that awful day when I was 10. I still remember every detail: the police officers at our door, Mom's face crumbling as they told her about the accident. Dad's van had crashed, and just like that, he was gone. Our whole world changed in an instant. I need to find a job, Mom said through her tears that night, after she thought we were asleep. I stood in the hallway, listening to her sob. The next week, she started working at the local hardware store as a saleswoman. It wasn't much, but it was all she could find on such short notice. From that day forward, I had to step up. Being the oldest meant taking on responsibilities I never thought I'd have at 10 years old. While Mom worked long hours at the store, I learned to cook simple meals, help my sisters with homework, and keep the house running. But the bills kept piling up. By the time I turned 16, it was clear we needed more income. I found a part-time job at a local cafe, working after school and on weekends. The pay wasn't great, but every dollar counted. It was during one of our rare family dinners when Mom broke the news about college. She looked at each of us, her face tired and worn. "Girls, I need to be honest with you. I won't be able to pay for your college tuition. You'll have to figure something out on your own." That announcement hit us hard, but it also lit a fire under me. I started studying like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. Every free moment between work shifts and household chores, I had my nose in a book. My grades had to be perfect, there was no other option. The hard work paid off when I got the letter, a full scholarship to college. I cried when I read it, and for once, they were happy tears. Mom hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Things worked out differently for my sisters. Marcy, being the determined person she is, took out student loans. She managed to graduate, but I knew those loans would hang over her head for years to come. Lana took a different path entirely. When she turned 18, she went straight into the workforce. Getting into college on a full scholarship was just the beginning. I quickly learned that books and tuition weren't the only expenses I had to worry about. I shared a small apartment with 2 other students, Sarah and Rachel, to split the rent 3 ways. "How do you manage to work so much and still keep your grades up?" Sarah would ask, watching me rush out for another shift at the campus coffee shop. The truth was, I barely slept. Between classes, studying, and working every spare hour I could, my days were packed. But I didn't have a choice, the rent had to be paid, and my family still needed help back home. "Mom, I'm sending you some money for the bills," I'd say during our weekly phone calls, already knowing her response. "Tiffany, honey, you should keep it for yourself," she'd protest, but I could hear the relief in her voice. Every month, I'd send whatever I could spare, sometimes leaving myself with just enough for ramen noodles and coffee. After graduation, things started looking up. I landed a job at a marketing firm, and that's where I met David. He started as the guy who always seemed to be getting coffee at the same time as me in the break room. Even with a good job and a growing relationship with David, I never stopped helping my family. Every time my sisters called with money troubles, I'd send them what I could, usually $200 or $300. Marcy needed help with car repairs, Lana had unexpected medical bills, and Mom's house always seemed to need fixing. "You're an angel, Tiff," Marcy would say. "I'll pay you back as soon as I can." We both knew that would never happen, but I didn't mind. I was finally in a position to help, and it felt good. When David proposed on my 25th birthday, everything felt perfect. We had a small wedding, nothing fancy, but it was exactly what we wanted. That's when the real miracle happened. "Babe, you need to see this apartment," David called me one day. "The owner needs to sell immediately, and my parents offered to help with the down payment." It seemed too good to be true, a 2-bedroom apartment in the city at an incredible discount. The owner was moving overseas and needed to sell quickly. With David's parents' help, we managed to buy it. I was so excited to share the news with my family. I thought they'd be happy for us, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Must be nice, Marcy said during our next family dinner, pushing food around her plate. Some people just have everything handed to them. Yeah, Lana chimed in. We're still stuck renting, and we've been working just as hard. What hurt the most was Mom's reaction. Instead of defending me, she nodded along. The girls do have a point, Tiffany. They could use their own places too. I sat there, stunned into silence. All those years of helping them, sending money, supporting them however I could, it felt like none of it mattered. They didn't see the scholarships I'd worked for, the long hours I'd put in, or the sacrifices I'd made. They only saw what they didn't have. Some habits die hard. Ever since college, I'd had this little tradition of buying lottery tickets before the holidays. It started during my freshman year, when I was particularly broke and dreaming of being able to buy real Christmas presents for my family instead of the handmade ones I'd been giving them. This Christmas was no different. I stopped at my usual store on my way home from work, bought my ticket, and stuck it in my purse like I'd done countless times before. I didn't even check the numbers until 3 days after the drawing. I was sitting at our kitchen table, sipping coffee and absently scrolling through the lottery website on my phone. Then I saw the numbers. I checked them again. And again. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly spilled my coffee. "David," I screamed. "David, come here." He came running from the bedroom, still in his pajamas. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" I couldn't speak. I just handed him my phone and the ticket. He looked back and forth between them several times, his eyes getting wider each time. "Holy shit," he whispered. "Tiff, this is $400,000. We sat in stunned silence for what felt like hours. Finally, David spoke again. "We should celebrate. Should we call your family? Your mom would." No, the word came out sharper than I intended. I felt tears welling up in my eyes. "We can't tell them. If they find out, they'll want it all. They already resent me for having an apartment. Can you imagine what they'd say about this?" A twinge of guilt hit me as I thought about Marcy still paying off her student loans. Maybe I should help her with that? But then I remembered her bitter comments about our apartment, and Mom taking her side. No, if I gave them anything, it would never be enough. They'd keep asking for more until there was nothing left. "What do you want to do with it?" David asked gently, pulling me back from my thoughts. I wiped my eyes and took a deep breath. "I want to buy a house. A real house, outside the city. Something with a yard where our kids could play someday." "But you have to promise me something," I said, gripping his hand tightly. "You can't tell anyone about the money. Not your parents, not your friends, and especially not my family. If they find out." "They won't," he assured me. "Not from me." "But what will we tell them about the house?" "We'll figure something out. A mortgage, help from your parents, anything but the truth." I know it sounds terrible, keeping this secret from them, but I trailed off, unable to finish. There was no way around it. I had to tell my family about the house. Living in the same city meant they'd find out eventually, and I wanted to control how they got the news. So I invited everyone over for dinner one evening, nervous about their reaction. "We've bought a house," I announced after dessert, trying to sound casual. "It's a nice place in the countryside, about 30 minutes from here." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom was the first to speak. "How on earth did you afford a house?" I stuck to the story David and I had prepared. "We got a mortgage, and David's parents helped with the down payment. The market was good, and we found a great deal." "Must be nice having in-laws with money," Marcy muttered, but I pretended not to hear. "Actually," I continued, forcing a smile, "I wanted to tell you all that you're welcome to use it whenever you want, at least until we move there permanently. It's a great place for weekend getaways." That changed their tune immediately. Suddenly, everyone wanted details about the house, the property, the number of bedrooms. Lana was already planning a weekend trip with her boyfriend. What followed was a parade of family members cycling through our country house. Every weekend, someone wanted to use it. Lana and her boyfriend became regular visitors. Then Lana got engaged, and she had another request. "Tiff," she called me one day, "would it be okay if we spent our honeymoon at the house? We're trying to save money, and it would be perfect." How could I say no to my baby sister's honeymoon? So of course, they spent a week there after their small wedding. It made me happy to see them enjoying the house, even if they didn't know the truth about how we got it. The problems started gradually. First, it was the mess they'd leave behind, nothing major, just dishes in the sink or wet towels on the bathroom floor. Then it was the constant requests for the keys, sometimes with barely any notice. "Hey, can we get the keys for tonight? Mark's parents are in town," Marcy would text, expecting an immediate response. I always said yes. It was easier than dealing with the guilt trips that would follow if I refused. David started to get annoyed, but I assured him it was temporary. Once we moved in permanently, things would change. Then came the Wednesday that showed me the unpleasant side of my family. I decided to drive out to the house to do some cleaning and check on things. As I pulled up the driveway, I noticed a car I recognized, Marcy's blue sedan. That was strange. She hadn't asked for the keys this week. I walked up to the front door and used my key to open it. The sound of the TV came from the living room, along with Marcy's laugh and her husband's voice. They both looked up, startled to see me standing there. "Oh, hey Tiff," Marcy said, trying to sound casual. "We just needed to get away for a day." "How did you get in?" I asked, though I already had a sinking feeling I knew the answer. Marcy shrugged, as if it were no big deal. "I had copies of the keys made a while back. It was just easier than bothering you every time we wanted to come out here." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "You made copies of my keys without asking me? I need those copies, now." "Fine," she huffed, digging in her purse. "Here. But I don't see why you're being so uptight about this. It's not like we've damaged anything." I took the keys from her, trying to keep my hand steady. It wasn't about damage. It was about trust, about boundaries, about respect. But looking at my sister's defensive expression, I knew she wouldn't understand that. A year passed, and I had news I couldn't wait to share. I was pregnant. David and I decided to tell everyone at our monthly family dinner. I imagined happy faces, hugs, maybe even some tears of joy. I couldn't have been more wrong. "Everyone," I said, standing up after the main course, holding David's hand for support. "We have some exciting news. We're having a baby." There was a moment of silence, then Mom smiled weakly. "That's wonderful, dear." But before anyone could say anything else, Lana cut in. "Wait, does this mean you're moving to the house permanently?" "Yes," I said, my smile faltering slightly. "We think it would be better for the baby to grow up there, with all that fresh air and space." "But where are we supposed to go for weekends now?" Lana interrupted. "That house is our getaway spot." I stared at my sister in disbelief. Had she even heard what I'd said? I was going to have a baby, her niece or nephew, and all she cared about was losing her free vacation house? The rest of dinner was tense. No one asked about the baby, about when I was due, or how I was feeling. Instead, there were whispered conversations about the house, about arrangements that would need to change. We moved to the house a few weeks later. My sister still visited, but things were different. I kept the visits shorter, making it clear they couldn't stay overnight anymore. This was our home now, not their vacation spot. Then came the night that changed everything. Marcy and her husband had come over for dinner. David and I had set up a nice spread on the back patio, and after dinner, the men were sharing a bottle of cognac while Marcy and I cleared the dishes. I was in the kitchen when I heard it, David's voice, loose from the cognac, saying words that made my blood run cold. "You know, we really lucked out with that lottery win." $400,000. Can you believe it? The sound of breaking glass made me run to the patio. Marcy was standing there, a shattered wine glass at her feet, staring at me with a look I'd never seen before. "Lottery win," she said, her voice trembling. "You won the lottery?" David's face went pale as he realized what he'd done. I opened my mouth to speak, but Marcy cut me off. "You lying bitch," she screamed. All this time you've had money. A gorgeous house, while we're all struggling to pay rent." "Marcy, please," I started, but she was beyond reasoning. "You should have shared it with us," she shouted. "We're your sisters. You've been living in luxury while I'm still paying off my student loans." "It was my ticket," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My money." "Your money?" She laughed bitterly. "You know what you should do? Sell that apartment in the city and split the money between me and Lana. It's the least you could do after lying to us for so long." "I'm not selling anything," I said firmly. "I'm sorry you're upset, but this money was mine to spend how I chose." Marcy's face contorted with rage. "We'll see about that. I'll take you to court, and you'll have to give us what we deserve. You think you can just keep all this for yourself? We'll see what a judge has to say about that." She grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door, her husband trailing behind her looking uncomfortable. As she reached the doorway, she turned back to me. "You're going to regret this," she spat. "You're going to regret being so selfish." I thought things couldn't get worse after Marcy stormed out that night. I was wrong. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. It was Mom. "How could you do this to us?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. "Marcy told me everything. Your own family, Tiffany. We've struggled all these years while you sat on a fortune." "Mom, please listen," I tried to explain, but she cut me off. "No, you listen. After everything I've done for you, everything I sacrificed? You owe us." The calls kept coming. If I didn't answer, they'd leave voicemails. When I blocked their numbers, they started emailing. Text messages flooded my phone day and night. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that stress wasn't good for the baby. But it was impossible to ignore the constant barrage of guilt and threats. "Share the money or we'll see you in court," Marcy threatened in another message. I thought they were bluffing about the lawsuit. Then the papers arrived. "Mrs. Tiffany Wells is hereby notified of a civil action filed against her," David read aloud, his face growing darker with each word. It was a class action lawsuit. My mother was suing me for $300,000, what she claimed it had cost to raise me for 18 years. Her lawyer had itemized everything: food, clothing, school supplies, medical care, even the cost of the bedroom I'd slept in. They'd calculated it all, down to the last dollar. "We demand compensation for the defendant's upbringing and maintenance from birth to age 18, the document stated coldly. Both my sisters had joined the lawsuit, backing up Mom's claims with their own statements. They testified about how much Mom had sacrificed, how she'd gone without to provide for us. The same sacrifices they'd now forgotten I'd helped ease by sending money home all these years. The stress began taking its toll. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Then one morning, I woke up to severe cramping. The pain was unlike anything I'd felt before. "Something's wrong," I gasped to David. "The baby." The next few hours were a blur of emergency rooms and worried doctors. The diagnosis was clear: the stress had put my pregnancy at high risk. I was admitted immediately. "If you don't reduce your stress levels significantly, you could lose the baby," the doctor told me gravely. I spent the next 2 weeks in the hospital, confined to bed rest. The white walls of my hospital room became my sanctuary from the chaos my family had created. David brought my phone one day, and I made him take it back. Just seeing the notifications made my blood pressure spike. The legal battle dragged on for months. David and I watched our savings drain away, $5,000 gone to legal fees, and still the case continued. I sat through depositions, listening to my mother detail every expense she'd ever incurred on my behalf. My sisters testified about her sacrifices, painting me as an ungrateful daughter who'd struck it rich and abandoned her family. They conveniently forgot about all the money I'd sent home over the years, all the bills I'd helped pay. Finally, after what felt like endless hearings, the judge made his decision. The court finds in favor of the defendant, he announced. Parents have no legal right to demand compensation for fulfilling their parental duties. Furthermore, lottery winnings are the sole property of the ticket holder. Case dismissed. But winning the court battle didn't end the war. My sisters took to social media, determined to destroy my reputation if they couldn't get my money. Watch out for family members who pretend to care about you but only care about themselves, Marcy posted, making sure to tag mutual friends. Lana was even more direct. Some people forget where they came from once they get money. They turn their backs on the family that raised them. Karma will come for the selfish ones. Their posts got shared in our extended family circles. Cousins I hadn't talked to in years were suddenly commenting, taking sides. Old friends from high school reached out, asking what was going on. The story spread through our small community like wildfire. I was sitting in our living room, scrolling through yet another hateful post, when David walked in. He took one look at my face and took the phone from my hands. Enough, he said firmly. This has to stop. We need to move, far away. Another state. Somewhere they can't reach us. He sat down beside me. I've already checked with my company. I can transfer to any branch I want. And you work remotely anyway. But the house, the apartment, I protested weakly. We'll sell them. Both of them. We'll start fresh somewhere else. He took my hands in his. Think about it, no more drama, no more stress. Just us and the baby. He was right. As soon as I was cleared by my doctor to travel, we put both properties on the market. The house sold quickly. Turns out a lot of people dream of country living. The apartment took a little longer, but eventually, we found a buyer. We packed our lives into boxes, carefully sorting what to keep and what to leave behind. Each item we packed felt like another step toward freedom. We didn't tell anyone our destination. Not my sisters, not my mother, not even our friends at first. We hired movers who wouldn't know our final address until the day of delivery. It felt extreme, but after everything that had happened, we couldn't risk my family following us. We'd been in our new home for about a month when my aunt called. Seeing her name on my phone screen didn't trigger the usual anxiety I'd grown accustomed to. Aunt Sarah had always been different from the rest of the family. Hey sweetie, she said warmly. How are you settling in? We chatted for a few minutes about the new house and the baby before her tone turned serious. I should tell you something, she said. Marcy came by yesterday. She was asking about you, wanted to know where you'd moved to. My heart skipped a beat. What did you tell her? Nothing. I told her I didn't know, which is true. You haven't even told me your exact address. She paused. But she asked me to let her know if I find out. She seemed determined. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Thank you, Aunt Sarah. For not telling her anything. Oh, honey, I wouldn't. I've watched this whole mess unfold. What they did to you, she sighed. It's not right. After hanging up, I walked into what would be the baby's room. David and I had been working on it every weekend, painting the walls a soft yellow, assembling furniture, laying down the plush carpet I'd fallen in love with. The rocking chair by the window was my favorite spot now. Sitting there, looking at the half-finished nursery, I thought about Marcy and her student loans. For so long, I'd carried that guilt around, the feeling that I should have helped her, should have shared my good fortune. But now? That guilt was gone. You made your own choices, Marcy, I whispered to the empty room. You're the one who started all this. You're the one who turned Mom against me. You chose money over our relationship. David found me there later, sketching out ideas for the shelving we wanted to install. "Look what I found," he said, holding up a stuffed elephant. "Perfect for the safari theme we talked about." I smiled, making room for him to perch on the arm of the rocking chair. We'd been so happy here, in our new life. No more angry phone calls, no more threatening messages, no more stress. Just us, planning for our baby, making our house into a home. I looked around the room, at the gentle glow of the evening sun through the curtains we'd picked together, at the tiny clothes already hanging in the closet, at the half-assembled crib waiting for its occupant. "This is what matters now," I said softly. "This room, this house, our family, the one we're building. Not the one I left behind." The baby kicked, as if in agreement, and I laughed. My world had gotten smaller in some ways, no more extended family gatherings, no more complicated relationships to navigate. But it had also grown infinitely larger, filled with the possibility of what lay ahead.